I have no idea what this is.
Hey, buddy!
Why are you here?
I showed up in almost every other D-list versus YouTuber's channel. I thought it was your turn. Looks to me like your views are going down and Death Battle's coming back. You know, I got a great idea. Why don't you get yourself some nice, good rest, and I'll help you handle the reviews. You get views and sleep, and I get your calorie-rich body. All you gotta do is shake my imaginary node! You can't just punch me, that's not how this skit works.
What, do you think I'm some fucking Bubsy slandering American? I got better things to do with my time than get harassed by geometry. So if you don't mind, I'll just go ahead and no-clip you into the Shadow Realm.
What? You can't just give yourself feet!
James Corden yummy dance moment. I'm not making back the time it's spent to animate this. Anyway, what am I reviewing? We're back, baby! Death Battle has made its grand return with Omni-Man vs Bardock, the long-anticipated run-back for Omni-Man. And by long-anticipated, I mean there were people whinging about Omnilander before, on, and after the day it dropped because it wasn't this instead. But before I review this episode, I want to say a few things to okay, this is damage control, okay? I understand what Death Battle's situation is. I know. They're independent now, and so I shouldn't expect everything to be as it was in the previous seasons. That said, I'm not going to give this episode special treatment just because it's the return of Death Battle after a long wait, nor am I going to pretend that it's perfect. I am still going to give my honest opinion. And while some things, such as animation quality, the lack of cutaway gags, and overall production values I can understand being impacted, I don't think the situation works as an excuse for any issues I have in writing, characterization, choreography, or so on. Which are the things I care about most in the fights. Now, they could of course correct me if any of the people who worked on the episodes watch my reviews. Maybe they'll say they just couldn't get in another draft or spend as much time going over things because of the situation. Maybe some things that I have problems with are actually in the storyboards and they just got cut. In which case, fair enough. But if and until that happens, I don't want to see anybody coming to Death Battle's staunch defense with, you can't criticize this because it's indie now. Instead of say, I don't know, actually I personally disagree and think what you didn't like was cool and I do like it. You know, the way someone I would respect might go about disagreeing with me. Like, say, fucking Biffweed, the moment we talk about our opinions on the episode and he liked some of the things that I didn't like, and you know what, that was completely okay for him to do that. On the other hand, I also don't want people coming in just talking about how bad the episode was because they disagree with the outcome of the calc. I personally was also expecting Bardock to win, and I can't really complain with how they scaled him, except that I dislike the usage of the Namek feat for speed. I don't like that feat. However, on Omni-Man's side, I am not as experienced, I've not read the Invincible comic, and while the lad I was doing the prediction with would likely have more to say about the feat and his take on it, the disc, I am not that lad. I am not an authority on the calc, how right it was, how Nolan scales, so on. I can only comment on what I've been told. What I've been told contradicts each other, and I am not going to hold that against either side, just because I expected a different outcome. I did joke about the episode giving Nolan the strength advantage and Bardock the speed advantage, flipping what the community thought on its head though, so I guess that checks out. Whenever I make an offhand joke, it ends up being more accurate than if I put any thought into it. It's like the least useful superpower. Look at me, I'm clairvoyant snide remarks man. And for my next prediction, I'll predict that you're about to skip after I say the sponsor of this video is G Fuel. That's right, the fuel with the G. I don't know what the G stands for, but it's probably Energy drink? 50 flavors, multiple forms of delivery, but 0 calories, carbs, or sugars.
Think, damn it! What will you have in 500 years?
G Fuel, Dad. I'll still have G Fuel.
G Fuel this!
I'm a Super Saiyan because of G Fuel!
I can't help but think this is the most incoherent ad read yet!
It's definitely not a cry for help!
Also, it's vegan friendly.
And you can head to the link in the description and use code BloodRock for 20% off your order.
Can I have some G Fuel, Dad?
Oh no, it contains caffeine. It's not suitable for kids under the age of 18. Plus, you need to drink it responsibly, Mark.
Yeah, I gave some to Raditz. Look how he turned out.
Who? There's always the hydration range though, and that's caffeine free, so you can just enjoy any of the 50 flavors.
Can I get to killing everyone already?
Anyway, let's actually talk about the episode. The first thing I noticed was that it's actually quite beefy. In length, this is not an episode that took a hit. Now, with how this one was possibly in production before any Rooster Teeth shutdown happened, I don't know if we can expect this consistently going forward. I personally like the longer 20-minute episodes being the norm, but I don't know. And I have not heard anything on whether or not the goals on Kickstarter matched how much money the episodes used to cost with Rooster Teeth, or if they adjusted it for their Indigo. I didn't watch that full stream, I had to go to sleep, and I've learnt just not to trust hearsay on matters like this. But this episode is nice and long, and I like that. I also noticed the start was really cut down, with Boomstick saying the matchup, Wiz giving one line after, and then less than half a minute in getting us straight into the analysis. Now, I do personally like the startup being a bit longer. I think the jump to just, "He's Wiz and I'm Boomstick," after Wiz gives us their subtitles feels a bit awkward and abrupt in a way that, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as abrupt when it's longer. I also prefer them giving a basic gist of what the matchup's theme is, given Death Battle and Versus in general is kind of built on which X is stronger, which dinosaur mech is stronger, which comic book archer is stronger, which PSA mascot is stronger, which Planet Eater is stronger. It just feels more characterful and I like it more. But I mean, Death Battle changes stuff like this not infrequently, I'll probably get used to it. After all, I preferred the explanation of the matchup coming before the character's title drops, and I still prefer it that way. But I have already gotten used to the names coming first by now, so I'll get used to it, don't worry. So let's talk about the analyses. Omni-Man's is pretty good. They did the thing where a calc comes super early in, but this is the way I actually like it done. They give an uninterrupted rundown of his basic backstory, they transition into his powers and how that relates to his intentions, and they gave a calc for one of his feats. Then they mention how the feat was a lowball because of a story reason that let them transition back into the story. A banger, I love that, I love it. Overall, the analysis is fairly good. Now, it doesn't quite delve into Omni-Man's wider story as I kind of expected. It honestly doesn't elaborate on the narrative much further than where the original episode did, I guess because of spoilers. But it's fine. I think the biggest loss with this episode coming now is that I can't imagine Omni-Man getting another episode, because his two big matchups have been done. So when the animated series gets far enough along that the full extent of his arc can be delved into, I just don't know if it'll happen. Now, there are other options for Invincible the series that likely would work to at least talk about later story developments, but I just haven't heard of any other any other major popular matchups for Nolan himself. Not to say that one couldn't come into existence in the future though. It's not a big deal, I think Nolan's is still good, and I think they went into a lot of detail on how they got Viltrum's size, which I do like a lot better than just saying, and it's really big compared to its moon. They actually really go in depth on it. That said, why is the timing for the Invincible splash card over Wiz saying Invincible off? That bothers me very slightly to a level that it shouldn't. It feels like there's a solid second between Wiz stopping in, then it showing up. Which may be the joke, Wiz saw it coming, but I don't think it's as funny as characters getting abruptly cut off. Bardock's analysis I think does go over him fine, because it, finishes his story and addresses his old situation and relationship with canon. I like that angle, and I like how it kind of goes over his original story, transitions a bit more into Minus and Super, and then naturally ends with episode of Bardock, because that kind of has to be the last thing talked about if it's used at all. Bardock's analysis I think does its best to try and make him sound interesting. It actually goes into Ozaru, which awesome, yeah, good. Hilarious how half the footage is just Vegeta's fight with Goku, that does make me giggle a bit. That said, I have remarkably little to say about Bardock's. It's pretty much what I expected, and that's not a bad thing at all. It's just that Bardock's not the most exciting character to analyze in this setting with how little there is going on with him. They did talk about his development in a way that almost made it seem well written though, so that's cool. And they try to justify Super Saiyan in a way that doesn't really make sense to me, but it's a nice capping for the character. I do like to imagine their hypothetical where Bardock goes Super Saiyan, thrashes first form Frieza, and then Frieza just goes, "Oh hey, I can do that too," and then transforms into his second form and tears Bardock in half. There's not much to say though. Oh, except that of course the editing for this episode is stellar. It's no surprise the editing popped off. Two of the most dedicated editors I know were at the helm, and they cooked hard. It's a gorgeous analysis, and I think the editing does elevate the overall result a lot. Okay, let's talk about the fight. The start of the fight is a little weird. This is an episode where the setup writes itself, but it feels like something is missing, at least in my opinion. Bardock shows up and says the planet is gross and buggy. Somehow he just knows upon landing, but didn't know in advance, I guess? But then Omni-Man just swings at him, accuses him of being there to conquer the world, despite later showing no signs of knowing what a Saiyan is. And, how do you know that? It feels like some proclamation of intention from Bardock is missing. We go from an Invincible reference to a Mortal 1 combat reference, though Nolan doesn't fly around the world to punch Bardock as he does in the game, he kinda just socks him. And Bardock calls him a wee head or something. We get a pretty cool aerial battle, and is it just me, or are some of Bardock's keyframes directly lifted poses from any of Fighter's Extreme Butoden or his actual fights in the anime? Because that's pretty cool. It's kind of standard to see the direct references in Sprite episodes, because the sprites for Dragon Ball are directly based on manga panels and anime stills quite often, but I just don't feel like it's as common in 3D Dragon Ball episodes. The next bit is another weird thing to me though. Nolan brings up Mark because reasons, and then accuses Bardock of doing something he's not doing, and Bardock responds to the sun part. I don't know, it feels like a clunky way to work in, them having kids as a connection. despite them fitting it in much better later with Bardock's Super Saiyan transformation. Like, okay, I guess it is a little funny for Bardock to be like, my power level of 2 Sun would beat yours. But it's also really out of character, at least for any Bardock I've read and watched to say that. It's so weird for him to focus on the Sun part and not the part where Nolan accused him of sticking his nose in places he's not ready. I understand that Bardock has become a nice guy, but Nolan pretty much just insulted his Saiyan pride by saying he's not ready for this fight, and Bardock does not react to that. I just imagine other things and comparisons he could make where Bardock focuses on the comparison and not the actual insult.
Just like open season. Lazy and unfunny.
I think The Prince of Egypt is a better movie.
Just like the pizzeria downtown. Sauceless and flat.
The burgeria 3 blocks down kicks its ass.
Just like my ass. Hairy and full of shit.
My ass farts bigger than yours.
Okay, I'm too immature not to laugh at that one though. Bardock fires the blue ball and it takes a really long time to actually hit Nolan. I just feel like something is missing. That being, you know, us seeing the blast actually hit Nolan. Because the glow it makes, it doesn't look like it's getting closer. But if we want to talk about glows, the rapid fire ki blast looks so good. I don't know what it is, but from the shot of Nolan from behind as the ki blast warp around his silhouette in a view, love that shot, to Nolan flying through them, to us seeing Bardock going ham, they just look really good. Like, the 2D style blast effects in the 3D environment look really good here. And I really like what happens next. You see, the conclusion comes to say that Nolan is much stronger, but Bardock is much faster. And we actually get to see that here. For the entire start of the fight, Nolan hasn't landed a solid blow. He's mostly been landing quick blows that lack his power, because if he wants to throw all his power in, well, I guess he's just not as fast, or something like that. So here, he throws the Saiyan pod at Bardock, who naturally stops attacking to go out of his way to catch it, because, you know, he kinda needs his pod. And Nolan uses the brief period where Bardock is focusing on the pod and unable to see him through it to build up power and land a solid, devastating punch. It works really well. Bardock is so much faster that for Nolan to land a truly powerful hit, he has to first do something to impede his ability to dodge. Sure, Bardock has his scouter, but Nolan doesn't know that, and also Bardock was focusing too much on his one method of getting off the planet to actually check his scouter. Also it vanished, so I guess that doesn't help. This is also the blow that I think has probably the most impact on the whole fight. This feels meaty as hell. Nolan stopping Bardock's arm looks weird though. I don't know where the blood comes out, it's a bit silly. Also his bandana is gone. This is the moment I got a better look at Nolan's model. Apparently it's a Devil Artemis custom, which makes sense. It looks really weird and I can't tell if I feel that in a good or bad way. I'ma settle on good though, it's not a bad model. The transition into Ozaru is really slick. Ignore the clipping. Having the moon become visible as the clouds move, Bardock's crumpled body facing it, the explosive transformation. I would have liked to see a bit more of the transformation itself, but it's a really cool sequence and this is my favorite part of the fight. I quite like Nolan's response to it as well. It's fittingly big balls and nonchalant, but not to be outdone, Bardock immediately puts him on the back foot and surprises him with his speed. That's the best part, they really emphasize that Ozaru is fast as fuck, especially for something of its size. And honestly, I take it back, the meatiest hit is the mouth beam. That looks sick. And the only time I ever felt like Nolan was on the back foot is this wombo combo. And I really like that the only reason the Ozaru doesn't work is because Bardock pivots from speed to focus on overpowering Nolan. Once he tries to use raw power, it doesn't work. That's cool, that's good writing. The way in which Bardock loses his tail though is a bit strange. I get it, but it feels really odd that Nolan spins him and the tail kind of just pops off with minimal effort. I know that Nolan is really strong, but I don't think it matters because he didn't try to yank the tail off. Even he's confused at how easy it was. The tail also stays the same size even after Bardock himself has shrunk when Nolan goes to smack him with it. And while that is an amusing image, I personally feel like the cleaner way to work this exact style in would be like Nolan purposely yanks the tail off because, you know, he's a big fan of brutally mauling his opponents, and then he knocks Bardock across the horizon with it before he or the tail could shrink. Then he looks at his hand in surprise because the tail starts getting smaller. This would also give us an actual transition between Ozaru and base Bardock, because as it is, we see the monkey get shown Garo's sick shot put skills, and then the next shot is regular Bardock, and it can feel a bit disjointed or like he was meant to be shrinking down in this shot. And then to get Bardock into space, I just have Nolan punch him in my version. I mean, the next shot already has Omni-Man slamming his body on their way to space, which I'll admit does look cool, and I think this is our first time having a blue star as a major set piece. I don't know, Galacticron doesn't count, everything was the set piece in that. Let me know, I don't recall if a blue star has been a major set piece in an episode before. It does feel a bit weird to have Nolan go from spearing him to grabbing him. Feels like something is missing or that Nolan should have been punching him into space here. Not really that big a deal though. Then we get Super Saiyan Bardock, and truth be told, Yeah, this was a pretty cool transformation. I will say, the line is a bit weirdly delivered. It sounds to me, and apparently a few people, like he was saying, "I will not let you take me away from my wife," when he's supposed to be saying, "my world," and I was a bit taken aback by how out of character it was, but no, that's in character. The line is delivered well, it's just something about it sounds odd. But in general, Nikar does a great job as Bardock. I still don't know exactly how to pronounce his name. Even the lines that are weird and feel a bit out of character are still delivered solidly, and he's especially good when the lines are more fierce than heroic, like the boast about Saiyan power and the Super Saiyan scream. Speaking of, I think this is the best Super Saiyan has ever looked on Death Battle. I can't really blame Goku or Vegeta in the debut episodes, season 1 was very limited visually, but like standard Super Saiyan hasn't shown up that much, and when it does, Broly, Vegeta, Gogeta, and Goku in his second episode have pretty flat looking hair, and Xenotrunks is kinda just his hair from Extreme Butoden. None of them look bad, but they don't capture the shining majesty of the form quite like Bardock does. And being set in space lets them really emphasize the glow. It looks incredible, and it stands out among the starry backdrop it's primarily seen in front of. It looks really good. Though, to be honest, Super Saiyan Bardock didn't really impress me in any other way, which I guess is accurate to the source material. But like, his hits don't feel like they have a ton of impact, the sound effects kinda just reminded me of wet meat slaps, and Omni-Man looks barely phased. He eats all of the shit and just looks fine. In fact, Bardock looks fucked up because the blood is all on his skin, so it looks like it could be his own blood, but the fact that Nolan's outfit is undamaged and still covered in blood, it makes it look like he's covered in Bardock's blood. In fact, the blood on him looks more like it's splattered on than bleeding out. Bardock kinda gets rocked a lot in this fight, which I get for base, and I think the way it's handled in Ozaru is pretty cool, but I can't get past how underwhelming Super Saiyan is. That said, Tom Schalk's grunt of effort from Omni-Man and the next line he also says are my favorite vocal deliveries of the episode. While visually I'm not sold on the power of this blast, though the actual shot of it being fired is really cool, Nolan's grunt does sell me that he put a lot of effort in to throw it aside. It took a lot out of him, and I buy that because of how he sounds, and he sounds pissed. He sounds like he's going all out, and he wants this fucker dead. Tom already had one of my favorite performances on the show in his last outing as Omni-Man, and this episode just cemented further, I love his Omni-Man. I think he delivers almost all of his lines fantastically and gets across everything that I like about Nolan in his performance. And honestly, with how good Nikar's scream earlier was, I really wish Bardock got to say something back during that final clash, or at least roar in effort, because I'd love to hear the two just really letting out everything they have here. Because without that shout, it feels like Bardock is delivering a normal punch while Nolan is telling him to fuck off and die. When I feel like it'd be better if it came off like Bardock was also putting everything in, you know, make his loss feel like it's because he overestimated the power of Super Saiyan and tried to overpower Nolan instead of relying on his speed, as opposed to making it feel like Bardock was just fighting as normal and Nolan got angry and punched Bardock and Bardock died. Which, yes, is what happened, but like, with how earlier Nolan couldn't land a solid hit without distracting Bardock, I just don't feel it here. You can interpret this as what I said, Bardock, like, overestimating himself and all that, but without that shout of effort, it feels like a normal Bardock punch, and I don't vibe as much with that. The blood pisses out of his arm when there's an explosion, his arm dies, and so does he. I'm not huge on how this next line is written, but I do like the last bit of Bardock using what's left of his energy to tell his opponent to remember the Saiyan name. I feel like "you said Saiyan" would only really work if Nolan had been refusing to call him by name the whole fight, but here it's like, of course he did. Now he knows what you're called. He never showed any refusal beforehand, he literally just didn't know what you were. I think Bardock just saying Saiyan on its own to himself to emphasize that he's focusing on the fact that Nolan remembered the name from when he said it earlier would be all you need, and then he maybe follows it on with remember that name, so the full line would just be Saiyan, remember that name. And that's really all you need. I think that would just feel a bit less clunky. But the idea is cool, and the death is pretty neat. I like the shot of Bardock falling towards the star and Nolan watching it. I didn't really care for Nolan just going, fuck, at the end, because it did make me laugh. It feels like a bit of a gag with how long the pause is. I think it's meant to be, like, hatred towards himself for losing his temper and acting like a standard Viltrumite when he's trying to be better. But the delivery doesn't sell that self-loathing feeling to me. And I think he could have been, like, looking at his hands or something to emphasize it. Actually, no, because people would meme that as him saying, I thought you were stronger, and that would kind of ruin the moment. Maybe he could just close his eyes and stay silent. Or, like, he could look at his hands, but not quite framed in the same way as that comic panel, and just close his eyes, clench his fists, and look like he's really bothered by what he's done. I don't know. I have a lot of problems with this fight, and some of them did admittedly interfere with my enjoyment. Now, I shouldn't have to say this, because it should be blindingly obvious to anybody old enough to be allowed to watch YouTube unsupervised, but this is just my opinion. If the things that bothered me didn't bother you and your enjoyment, guess what? That's okay. You're allowed to feel that way. But to me, I was bothered by a few things, such as Bardock's portrayal. Now, I'm not super well versed in, well, Super Bardock. I didn't read that entire arc. I just read some parts of it. So if this is an accurate portrayal of how he is by the end of that arc, then take this as a criticism towards Bardock's characterization more than how Death Battle portrayed it. But he feels really selfless in this fight. He shows up and mocks the planet, but he doesn't intentionally try to kill anyone or destroy anything. He rightfully defends himself when attacked. He ignores his pride being insulted to instead talk about how cool his children are. He talks about his children and his world when going Super Saiyan, and he has like 2 lines about his pride in the Saiyan race, and it's not even his own like pride towards himself. The appeal of Bardock, at least I thought, was that despite being the protagonist of his story wasn't that important, and he himself was a glimpse at what the average Saiyan warrior was like. And even in Super, while he mellows out a bit, I thought he was supposed to at least keep a veneer of being that kind of guy. But here he, if anything, seems more like a superhero. He's all about his family and how much he loves his race and all that. He doesn't care when he himself is insulted or insinuated to be incapable or inexperienced. Make fun of Bardock, he doesn't mind, he has no Saiyan pride. He's kinda chill with dying, despite moments ago losing his fucking mind over the thought of being taken away from his family. I just didn't feel like I was watching Bardock. But again, to be fair, I haven't felt like I've been watching Bardock since 1990. And that's not to say all of this is necessarily wrong. Having pride in his race and his world, I think, is more or less on board. It's just that in the context of what he says around it, it paints a more overall heroic picture. I felt bad for Bardock, because I never got the impression that he was a conqueror of worlds in this fight. With that said, aside from the kind of out of nowhere mention of Mark, I think Nolan was pretty on point. Even his last line, "I don't like," does fit him, it's just the delivery's a bit off. Nolan, I think's done pretty well. I wouldn't change that much about how he was written. And the fight in general is still really cool. It has a few moments that show off Bardock's superior speed, but Nolan's superior strength without feeling too in your face about it. Orzuru was awesome and it delivers the wombiest of combiest hits. The Super Saiyan form looks amazing with how it's framed and how bright it is, and Nolan does feel like a beast. Though, it does also feel like he can't just slap Bardock around, but as I said, base Bardock, I get it. Orzuru, done well. It's just that Super Saiyan felt like it didn't do any damage whatsoever. All those hits, and the moment Nolan got mad, he just kinda killed Bardock effortlessly. Again, I think Bardock's blinding rage could have been emphasized before that last blow. Make it come across like Bardock also gave in to his nature as a monster, and his loss comes from trying raw power over speed. And I have to imagine, Nolan was probably meant to look more beat up at the end and not like he's covered in his opponent's blood, because to me, it looks like both are covered in blood, but only one was bleeding. And as it turns out, I'm actually right, because between writing that segment and waking up the next morning to record it, the storyboards dropped, and we can actually see how much of what I said is what was intended. For a start, something I didn't even think was that the bodies of dead bugs were meant to stain the ground around Bardock's pod. That would explain why he says "ill bugs," and it does make Omni-Man's attack on him a bit more justified. Nolan was meant to do the around the world punch from Mortal Kombat 1, Bardock was meant to say his sunline while in a combo that would blast Nolan away instead of pausing and then giving us the shot of Nolan being launched. This change I'm more or less fine with. I think the shot being evocative of like, it's Bardock, it's like he's doing the Bardock thing, is cool. I also definitely prefer the framing of the rapid fire ki blast coming into view in the episode. The storyboard one's fine, I just think the episode looks better. Though Nolan's battle against the blast is definitely more engaging in the storyboard, with them actively hindering him and holding him back from getting to Bardock, instead of it looking like he's dodging or tanking them effortlessly. Bardock was also meant to get his arm proper fucked up, explaining the blood, and the transformation into Orzuru was meant to be more dynamic. Also, John's way of drawing Omni-Man in this particular shot it just looks so good. I don't know what it is. This shot just looks, don't ask. Nolan was also meant to already look like he's pissing blood from the Ozuru's blows, which makes sense with how they're sold. And yeah, Bardock was meant to shrink here. Nolan also was supposed to be punching Bardock into space instead of spearing him. He also had another line here that I don't really mind them cutting. Bardock was also meant to proper lay into Nolan, fuck up his leg, and his expressions were supposed to emphasize his blinding rage and loss of control over the calm serenity he has in the episode itself. Either one I think is fine for starting in the form. Both fit, he does both those things in episode of Bardock, I would prefer having him with a degree of calm in his face early on into Super Saiyan, and then once Nolan starts fighting back, he just loses it and gets really mad, because that's really what happens in episode of Bardock. A whole sequence also got cut where Nolan goes for a punch after tossing the beam, but Bardock continues to speed blitz until Nolan predicts his attack and catches his arm. The two lose themselves in headbutts and then they go for the finishing blow. Nolan's fist also travels through Bardock's arm instead of making it Kenshiro explode, and as much as I prefer this, I don't know how you could even make that look good in 3D. At least I've not seen it made to look good in 3D. It probably can be done. It probably has been done. Maybe even on Death Battle, maybe I've just forgotten. But, I don't know. Bardock is also meant to still be in Super Saiyan as he falls into the star, but I'm not really bothered one way or the other for that. And yeah, Nolan is meant to look proper fucked up. So pretty much all of my problems with the presentation weren't supposed to be that way. So I was right. And people saying, you're just nitpicking. No, that is what Death Battle intended. Almost everything that I said I would fix is something that Death Battle also was planning. But why is it not that way? I have to assume, and I'm not an authority on this, a combination of limitations of what could be done in the software with these models, and yeah, probably a budgetary thing and time constraints. Devil Artemis is extremely skilled, don't get me wrong, and I have no doubt that with enough time and if he was getting paid enough to make up for the time spent on it, he could properly realize what's on the storyboard. But I can imagine his Omni-Man model probably was never meant to be converted into looking like this. And stuff like crushing his leg was out of the question too. I don't imagine he had a model for a crushed leg, which he'd have to make, and only for a few moments where it'll barely be seen. And Bardock's arm I think is the same. Dragon Ball doesn't really have excessive gore, so an existing model for a crushed chunk of arm probably doesn't exist, and just deforming it like the Ruby Volume 1 cigar would look really shitty. Now, taking the whole arm off I can imagine would be easier, because you just cut that off the model and you just build the stump. But I think crushing it would be a much grander deformation of the arm, and that would be difficult. And I imagine if a whole sequence like the punchy headbutt had to get cut for time, he probably just didn't have time for smaller details like the bugs littering the ground at the start, or giving Bardock really angry expressions. I can understand if time constraints being a thing was why Devil Artemis chose to go with Tranquil Fury Super Saiyan, because it fits well enough and it isn't as much work. And I still like the fight, don't get me wrong. I already know because I've got criticism, people are going to say I'm hating on Death Battle. No, I like the fight. I have problems with the fight, but the base Dragon Ball punchy action is there. It has plenty of cool choreography at points, it looks really nice, it has some pretty clever writing for the action, and again, Super Saiyan looks so fucking clean. The entire Ozaru bit, while having differences to the storyboard, I would call pretty much perfect. Up until literally the way in which Ozaru stops being there, it's pretty much exactly what I would have wanted. This is a good fight and a great return for Death Battle, and if the only concessions for losing Rooster Teeth backing going forward is going to be 3D fights won't be able to get quite as gory because there's not as much budget to model all the injuries, that's fine by me. For all the problems I have, this is an absolute we're so back moment, because like, yeah, I mean, it's Omni-Man vs. Bardock, and it delivers on Omni-Man vs. Bardock. Oh right, the conclusion. Sure hope nobody goes ballistic over this outcome, and I sure hope that if they do, they don't randomly go after the planet Viltrum feat instead of the Sun Disk feat that was the main thing they gave Nolan. Okay, but unironically, why do I see so many people saying the research on Bardock was bad? Because they put him exactly where I saw everyone having him. People had him exactly where they put him. Massively upscaling over the exact Vegeta feat everyone was using, scaling to the exact Goku feat that everyone is using, potential scaling to the Frieza Supernova that people were already pushing. They were pushing that as the high end, he scales to the Supernova. Are you mad they didn't specifically say that Bardock scales above Ginyu? Newsflash, dickhead, they bring up that he survives Frieza Supernova. Suffice to say that from that point, scaling to Ginyu would be a straight up downgrade. I guess some people were probably hoping for the Garlic Jr. feat, I can understand that one, but I did not see that getting pushed nearly as much. Same with the Planet Alia feat. I understand having issues with the Sun Disk feat. There's a lot of contention over it, and for both of the people who argue respectfully on why they don't agree with Death Battle's calc and methodology, and thus don't agree with the outcome, fair enough. I don't think people should be gatekept from arguing against Death Battle's points, as long as they're not doing so in ways that, say, attack the character of the show, creators and researchers, or I don't know, as long as people don't attack the editors who had nothing to do with the research. Anyway, I like the conclusion. It felt meaty but also concise. I don't always want them to do the categorizing format, but I like it every now and again. That said, Bardock is rightfully shown as faster in base here, but then once the multiplier comes in, This graph seems to imply that 20 billion is a bigger number than 9.5 trillion. A simple mistake, not a big deal. I have to assume if it was Galaxy Video Max editing this, that it's something he would have fixed if someone hadn't coughed 3 rooms across and altered the room temperature of the house by 0.02 degrees, thus ruining the drinkability of his room temperature tap water. That's a joke for like 5 people to get. I will also say, while I can't comment on the validity of the Sun Disk's feat or its calc, I can comment on presentation. Personally, I'm a bit confused as to how these scans prove scaling for the Sun Disk. It's just things saying some stuff can hurt Viltrumites. I guess maybe it's meant to be that up until now we didn't have anything that could, and that includes the Pew Pew laser that broke the Sun Disk. I don't know, maybe this is just something that's not as easy to present concisely. But I also think it's weird that they emphasize the size of the planet that was being blocked from the sun, which I thought meant that for their calc, they'd assume that the world is like as big as Viltrum or something, given that they calc its size earlier. But then the Lagrange point they use is just the one for the Earth and Sun. So like, I assume this is meant to be like a lowball for the feat, using this method, lowballing it to let's just assume it's Earth-sized, and the Sun is as big as our Sun. But not mentioning that makes the sequence feel a bit disjointed. Though, how many people are going to really notice the Lagrange point at L1 and be like, "Oi, that's just the Lagrange point between Earth and the Sun, that's L1 in real life." Me. It's not a big deal, but I feel like mentioning that and that this is a lowball would have failed. Hey, wait, zoom in! The Board of Wisdom? Let's fucking go! The Board of Wisdom is back! We might have sacrificed the cutaway gags, but in their place, we got this tiny graphic at the bottom of the screen that makes me way happier than it should. Next, you'll tell me that Boomstick says next time on Death Battle again for the first time since like season 4 or 5. I will note, it's really funny to me they claim that Bardock has versatility with Super Saiyan. I don't think a power boost counts as versatility. Like, yeah, the ki blasts are, so that it checks out, but anyway. Also, I only noticed during editing, but the graph that shows the comparison of their strength is actually wrong because it puts Super Saiyan Bardock at 500 times base. It actually multiplies by 50 the Great Ape stat. It should be 774 Ronatons in base, and then 7,740 in Ozaru, and 38,700 in Super Saiyan, but the graph they got would put it at 387,000, not 38.7 thousand. It should be 38.7 quetatons, not 387. It is not a big deal, but it is stacked on top of Great Ape, and I'm pretty sure that Super Saiyan is a 50 times multiplier on base, not a 50 times multiplier on Ozaru. Maybe Golden Ozaru's like that, but I do not believe that's how it's supposed to go for Super Saiyan. I don't think it's meant to stack on top of it. So while it shows Omni-Man having like a 20 times power like gap on top of Super Saiyan Bardock, it should be 200 based on their calc. Not saying independent of their calc, I mean based on their calc. Unless I'm just reading this graph wrong, I could be, but I think it is incorrect. I think it should be 38.7 quetatons. Oh yeah, the track was cool too. Really dumb name though. So yeah, 2 pretty damn good analyses, a pretty good fight, and a pretty good conclusion. This is a really fun episode, and a great start to the new era of Death Battle. It's not perfect, but I don't think I was looking for a flawless banger to start off the era. This has room to grow from, but it's still a very solid foundation, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Next time.
Yes! He said it! No! Not this matchup! I predicted it multiple times over. I saw this coming. Yeah. So, yeah, good episode. I don't know what else you want me to say. I liked it. Good job to everyone who worked on it.
If you're such a brilliant scientist, why don't you count the sun disk?
Unknown planet size, unknown star size, unknown parameters. Fuck that!
You know what, I'm humming. Good points to you. Hello everyone, why'd I start like that? Hey everyone, this is the end of the video. Yeah, thank you to all the patrons going by right now. I'll get that out of the way right away, because you're all great. but I said like it's an obligation. No, it's a thank you. Thank you for all supporting me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I don't know. I woke up in a lot of pain and very tired. But I gotta get this recorded because why not? A new episode of Death Battle's out. Tell me what you thought below about the episode's quality overall, not just the research, please. I do not care. I mean, I care a little bit, but in the sense of like, you know, I care about validating my prediction, but it did not get validated, so now I'm sad. That said, if you think I'm salty, me and the guy that I was with, who was a lot more, you know, dedicated, I guess, to the matchup, both started making jokes, playfully, so it's not like it's that serious, alright? Anyway, yeah, if you enjoyed, please do whatever you want, I guess, but I would really appreciate it if you know, liked and shared the video, and you can tell I'm really bad at these, and like I just transitioned into that so smoothly. Not even what am I talking about? That wasn't smooth at all. That was really clunky. Alright, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm gonna keep saying that. Hopefully sometime after this or around this, Biff Weed will have his review out. By the time it is, it will be linked in the description. Unless, of course, he comes around and tells me, actually, I'm not doing a review, I've decided not to anymore, this is my Welsh voice. Then I'll go, well, that's a shame. Yeah, if you liked this, Patreon, I keep saying if you liked this, if you enjoyed this, why am I doing that? If you want to support me, you can go to Patreon, where you can find my Patreon, and you can give me Patreon money, and by that I mean just real money, and you can join my Patreon-only Discord. But there's still people ask me about the public Discord. That got so flooded with just bad people that it's not public anymore. So now the only one you can get into is the Patreon-only Discord, and the other Discord is exclusive for people that I tolerate. And yeah, you get on the Patreon-only Discord, you can maybe say stupid stuff, so let's get to it. More like, I'm not saying that. Truly, this is the solid state Invincible moment of all time.
I think I missed Death Battle causing an uproar.
Bardock may have saved Goku's life and allowed his son to one day rise up to defeat Frieza, but it was Omni-Man who came back with the milk, making him Father of the Year. Piss.
Just like my son. On Fraud Watch!
That fucking sun disk that I hate.
Maybe the steps were the mountains we moved along the way. Serving up some anime's Super Saiyan flambe. It's the saddest death of a gorilla since Harambe.
When do I get to kill Omni-Man?
That's the neat part, you don't.
Now, okay, so this bar is made extra funny from my Homelander versus Omni-Man not epic rap battle, but David, this is not actually what the bar was. It was, just one call, I'll kick your ass with Bardock.
Oh no! Anyway, gritty.
I will not let you destroy my world!
Anyways, Left Feet was more stupid than my scaling. Like your parenting is just another way you're failing. I'm a bug fucker. Country? Seriously? I'm not here for your country. I'm here to prepare your planet for assimilation into the Viltrum Empire, which I have been fighting for over 2,000 years. I've been biding my time on Earth until my son Pinkmarch started to develop his Viltrumite superpowers, which has now begun at the age of 17. The first step of my plan was to execute the Guardians of the Globe. Don't worry, Bardock fans, sooner or later XVX will let Bardock win in his episode, and then you will plastering...
I don't know why. I was like halfway between two different like Markiplier. Oh, I'm just gonna do a Markiplier impression.
Hello everybody, Buzz Lightyear. Don't worry, Bardock fans. Sooner or later, XVS will let Bardock win in his episode, and you'll be plastering all over it. Now this is the real Death Battle and whatnot.
Markiplier, famous fan of Death Battle. Alright, that was that. That was honestly a better batch of things to read out than usual, so maybe Death Battle is the key to that. I don't know. So yeah, have a good one, everyone, and I'll be seeing you.